meeting of the Fergus Falls Port Authority to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting on December 19 and the approval of the agenda. So looking for a motion to accept the minutes.
I'll make that.
Thank you, Brent.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Bridget. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against, same sign. Hearing none, the agenda and the minutes are approved. The second item on the agenda is the election of Port Authority officers, and I will turn that over to Ms. Beck.
Thank you, current Chair Hicks. Yes, we are into 2023. It is now time to elect our new slate of officers. I asked for and received a few anonymous nominations. You can still make nominations publicly tonight if you would like, but this is what was received before the meeting. And what we will do is we will run through each of them and we will do hand votes. We will be recording each of the names to say who has voted for whom. But we, instead of doing roll call or anything, we'll just do counting of the hands for each of the offices. But before we move on, any additions you'd like to make?
Just a quick question. Everyone here has agreed to serve in that role if so elected.
For the most part, yes. At least specifically for president, which is the big one.
That is, the one that I put in for president isn't up there.
Then it was not received.
Okay.
But he can still
But you
nominate.
You can still
make it.
nominate somebody.
Yeah.
Yep.
Would you like to make it right now?
Yes, I still want to remain with Anthony Hicks as president.
Okay. So we'll add that to the list.
And Bridget, you've been serving as secretary, correct? Or vice
Correct.
president?
I think secretary.
We're thinking secretary. Yeah, okay.
It's an honorary title.
Yeah. It's some signing. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to sign documents and all that.
Oh my gosh.
Hi.
Okay, any other nominations for president? No? Okay, then let's, if we're ready, let's do the vote for
So
president.
I can withdraw my name because I nominated Bridget for president. And I thank you, Brent.
Then we will do a show of hands. Who would like to see Bridget as president of the Port Authority for 2023?
Well, might as well.
Yep.
Okay, so it's a unanimous vote.
Congratulations, Bridget. You're gonna do great.
Well, since we're removing names, then I'd like to have my name removed as vice president.
And I didn't know that I was even up there on vice president, so.
You are
Feel about
a
that.
You know, like I said, I'm new to the show, and maybe Brent would be better than I would.
vice president isn't.
What's that?
You can keep your name on there.
But
Well, I actually
if the
nominated
president
you.
isn't here, then the vice president runs the meeting,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
I mean, that's kind of the duty of kind of vice president.
So if it comes down to me and Al, you're just going to flip for it or what?
Flip for it.
Who flips it?
The
Oh. Thought he was putting his hat in the ring.
No, I'm not supposed to wear my hat during meetings.
I don't have a coin to do
We'll just
any
vote.
voting.
we can just vote. So
Okay, let's just, yep. So all in favor of Brent for vice president, put your hand up, please.
God, I'm gonna
Next
have
year,
to
Al.
move away.
He'll be ready next year.
yep.
All right, that was unanimous. We will not move on with the vote for Al as VP. We'll move ahead with Brent as VP for 2023. Thank you, guys. Secretary. We have Anthony Hicks is our only nomination. Any additions?
I'm quite happy to be secretary. It's
Okay, all in favor of Anthony Hicks as secretary? Okay, thank you. And assistant treasurer, we have, oops, sorry guys.
the only one that is Steve Shudak.
Yep, Steve would be our only.
And
option.
it's really an honorary title because we actually have
Yep.
the
And he's already
wonderful
been
Bills
performing that role, so this would not be a change.
that performs all the duties.
Well, we try.
So
So all in favor of Steve continuing as treasurer?
I think that's unanimous.
Okay. Thank you, that business is complete. We have a new slate of officers. And welcome Bridget as new president, and Anthony, thank you for your service as
that's
our
fine.
past president.
Thanks, Anthony.
The Bridget regime.
Oh, boy. Oh, all right, here we go. All right, so the next thing on the agenda is the financial update from Sonmore, please.
All right. So you didn't have this in your packet, but I did bring paper copies as well. Is there anyone that would like a paper copy tonight? Okay. Bridget wants one. Sure.
Thank you.
Sure, I've got it up here, but just, yeah, it's
We'll let
bigger
those
print.
get around and then we'll. This will just be kind of a brief update tonight. I can guarantee you the numbers are going to change as we go through our audit process. So these are not audited, they're not even adjusted for any accruals at the end of the year. But I kind of wanted to reconcile out, because within this Port Authority, we have kind of two sets of funding, our general Port Authority funding, and then that which we hold for the Community Behavioral Health Hospital. And I kind of have to manually keep those separate within this fund, so it's a good check for me, and then it was good to bring it before you and remind you again what funds we have and what we're holding it for. So, and again, this is just one fund out of the city. This is our Port Authority Fund. Fund 202 is the number of it. Just as an FYI, we have probably 80 to 90 active funds within the city that are kind of kept like separate businesses. So on the first page, the balance sheet just shows our assets and liabilities and fund balances. So the cash on hand as of the end of the year for the general side of the Port Authority is $366,344. For the CBHH, $543,370. We have some taxes receivable due, that's the property taxes. That is the balance as of a year ago, so when we get through our audit process, that number will get updated then. So I haven't changed that all year on that number. And then due from other funds of $9,000, that's with the project fund for the dairy. We also have a large due to other funds for that, so it's the net of the two. Again, I'll reconcile that out when we go through our audit as well. But those numbers are pretty up to date right now. I don't see big changes on those because we haven't had a lot of new expenditures on the dairy right now. Due from other governments, federal, that $95,000 is for the dairy property. If you recall, our two main funding sources were a revolving loan fund through Minnesota Deed and the demo loan. This $95,000 is for the revolving loan fund. It's the federal portion. So we were awarded $1.23 million through that revolving loan fund, and 78% of that, if I'm getting my, 78% was the federal portion, forgivable grant portion of that. I think I have that right.
I think you do too.
Andrew's
Yes.
nodding, so.
Because 450 was the bond portion of that. I'm going off of memory here, so. Due from other government state, $18,716. Jill reconciles the CBHH operations with the state, so we're always made whole. So the Port Authority isn't out any cost. The state covers everything for that. And we'll again be adjusting that for the end of the year. Property held for resale is all the land that the port owns. So the Norgren property, the industrial parks, the dairy property, all those costs in there sum to that $3.6 million. Liability side, we have a little bit of accounts payable there. That's related to the CBHH facility as well. Due to other funds, that all relates to the dairy. So as we get our other funding sources in, then we'll pay that back over to the project fund. Really, the city is upfronting the cost for that. We're using the accounting treatment of due to, due from other funds to show that on the Port Authority's books. Deferred revenue goes with taxes receivable up above and a little bit of other revenues that are will be adjusted with the audit. So then the net, the fund balance for CBHH operations, $18,502. Renewal and replacement is for that CBHH building of $542,000, leaving the balance of $2.8 million. Again, fund balance, that takes, the land is in that number, so that's not all spendable resources, but it's the net worth, you could say, of the land that the port has. Turning over to the profit and loss statement. On page 2, you can see current property taxes, $58,000 versus the $60,000 budget. We'll get a final payment in now towards the end of January that will apply to last year as well. We have our farmland rental in there, and then the CBHH rents. That's the state revenue coming in. The expenditure side, the first section, economic development, that's the general business of the Port Authority. That's separate from the CBHH. We're coming in under budget a bit there, which is certainly good, but definitely on track. On track there. The CBHH facility, we're under budget there, but I also plug in the whole amount of their rent that if we were to use it for capital, so that we're showing in our budget, here's all the money coming in and here's how it would go out. We often don't spend all of it. It goes into that reserve for renewal and replacement. Going to the third page, comes down to excess or deficiency of revenues over expenditures. So revenue over expenditures at this time, $81,000. Net loss on investments, we've talked about those previously this year and with the city council. City governments are required to mark our investments to the fair market value. So unrealized losses, so as the value has decreased, we have to reconcile that in our financial statements. We haven't sold those investments. We had several years of great gains. So this is kind of a give back year on that, but starting to come back around a bit now as well. November, we actually were positive. December was just a slight decline. So look forward to that coming back more. Bond proceeds in there of the $83,000 as well. That was the last payment of the demo loan that we received during this year. And then if you turn to that final page that you've got there, is the cash projection, and I won't go through this in detail, but it shows kind of where we've been and where we're going. And if you look in that far right column of 2024 coming down, where we'd end out about at around $100,000, that's really close where we were when I brought this to you at the end of the second quarter. As you recall, when we were talking about the budget and funding the first 2 years payments on the dairy loans, and that projection of $100,000, that's really my whole goal of bringing this so that we keep that fresh in our mind. What kind of money do we have on hand and where are we at? So that's why I did these projections, showing that I still need to move the gravel sales of $60,000, that's still sitting in the port, over to the project fund. And then as the payments come in, finaling up the dairy loans, it shows the cash flow through here. So I'll stop there so I don't take too much of our time, but any questions on that? Again, these numbers will change as we prepare for the audit. Things like the study we just did that we're going to talk about, certainly that work was done in 2022, right? The bulk of it. I'll be accruing that in payables here and booking it to the expense. The cash flow will go, though, like we see it here, where the cash actually will go this year. I'll stop there.
Just timeline for the audit?
Yep, auditors always come in for the city the third week in March, so March 20th is when we start it. We don't present it to the city council till the first meeting in June, and the Port Authority is treated just as one fund of the city, so we don't have a separate audit for the port. You're included within the city.
Thanks.
Could you remind me what the loan payments are for the dairy?
Let me think.
Okay, we don't know.
For the one, it's like $35,000 a year. The other one is a bit higher. Do I have that?
It's on
In the cash
2020.
flow, I do
Yeah.
have
53.
here, so 2023, 53,000 on the demo loan. The revolving loan is the 34,785. And I'm showing some payments in 2024. That's the February 1st of 2024 payment. When we looked at that, the port is funding the levy requirements, basically, that would have been for 23. So you collect all that money during 23 and you make the final payment in 24. So that's why for cash flow, it's showing up the years we'll actually pay it, so. So yeah, basically, on the bottom of this page is kind of where you see the sum total of what the Port Authority's agreed to fund. So anything beyond here, you have not agreed to fund that, and we would, if we haven't sold it for development yet, we'd start levying for those payments then in basically in 24. Good question, though, thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I could add to that one of the requests that the city is making from the legislator this year in the bonding bill is to see if we can't get 1.2 million from the city to buy the land from the Port Authority, as well as another kind of 1.6 million for the 2 railroad crossings, and I think 1.5 million for trails.
Trail, I think,
1.5
yeah.
million for trails.
Anthony, thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you.
On the bottom of that cash flow page, I will point out the shortfalls right now on the dairy project as far as a funding source. So I'll start with the lower one first. We have a shortfall of 208,000. We always knew there could be some sort of shortfall, but that really relates to we were not able to draw down all of the demolition loan, because as we were going through that with deed, they were determining some costs ineligible. I don't necessarily agree with that. There's also nothing I can do about that because that was closed as of June 30th. I think Brian and I both we would like to have fought that more, but be that as it may, we weren't able to draw down all of that, which led to that 200,000, and then the LCCMR that we didn't receive, the 600,000, which feeds right into that price that Anthony's talking about, where we're asking the bonding bill, fund this, state of Minnesota, fund this purchase between the city and the port, so the port could be made whole on that. And we need that project funding, so.
Can you repeat those dollar amounts, Anthony?
The land was 1.2 million,
Okay.
and the rail crossings was 1.6 million. And was the trail, I can't remember what the trail was, Andrew, can you?
I'll pull them up.
Yep.
I'll pull them up so we give you the right numbers.
I might even have a paper copy here.
Good information.
Yeah.
Here's the paper one.
Yep. So it was, yeah, it didn't break it out.
1.2 million for
Oh, I-
acquisition of the river buffer parcel.
Okay.
1.3 million for rail crossings on Broadway and St. Andrews. 1.5 million for trail and amenities through the dairy property. And then 1.2 million towards something else, not related.
Yep.
Old Smoky, the Renaissance of Old Smoky.
Okay.
And that first number you said was 1.2 just for the land.
Acquisition.
Just for the
Yep.
land. So that would be taking the strip of land that would make the trail, that basically LCCMR would have funded.
And basically, that 1.2 is this 800 that I'm pointing out here, plus the 400,000 that we were looking at taking from our general fund balance to match that. So we're asking for that total 1.2.
Okay, any other questions from Bill?
Okay,
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is the dairy RFP, and Clara can speak to us about that.
Thank you, Chair. And we also have Kim with us again tonight via Zoom, so I will pull her up so you can see her.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Kim.
Hi, Kim. Kim. There, we can see you now. All right.
Oh, so that wave was for nothing.
Okay, so you have received what I'm thinking and maybe assuming is a final draft of the RFP that we can take another look at, have some final discussion, and then get our timeline moving to have this out the door and start seeing what development potentials exist for us. But any comments, questions for Kim at this point? And Kim, feel free to jump in if you have any comments or anything as we're going.
I got one comment. I was just looking at the submittal requirements, and we talk about the city of Fergus Falls, and then we talk about the developer and the port authority, and that the city reserves the right. And then it says city staff and port authority members, and I wondered if we should have some point of clarification that the city and the port authority are one of the same or not one of the same. It's on page 7.
Yeah, we could do that.
It's like we say the city, and then we say kind of like the city, and then the city and the port authority and city staff. And so I just think we should clarify, are you dealing with the port authority, are you dealing with the city, or are you dealing with both?
Kim, what are your thoughts on how we can word that?
I guess I don't have a strong feeling either way. Is there a specific group, the Port Authority versus the council, that are going to be the primary people that the developer would be dealing with? Because we should probably highlight that, and maybe that's the clarification piece.
My understanding has been that the Port Authority would be the group that's making decisions on any RFP respondents, and then would work with the council beyond that.
So would it be like we would be making a recommendation to council to accept this RFP? Is that kind of how
Well,
you're?
you'd be, since you're still owners of the property, I think you can make that determination, and then as things progress and if the city needs to get involved, then you would work with the council. But you have the, I think, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have the ability to make decisions on your own behalf at this point.
Because we own the land.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
I think it should reflect that the Port Authority has the ability to reject any and all responses. Port Authority is not responsible for any costs associated with responding to this. I think you can say city staff and Port Authority members
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
but you could also say Port Authority staff.
Yeah,
It's
but
going
it-
to declare predominantly that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the
guess-
paragraph on the right side where it says the port and the city will partner, I think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
This just brings up one other question I would have is if we get a developer, we're moving along, like negotiating the purchase, talking about the project. Obviously, ultimately, the project has to get approved through the normal city approval process. But I mean, is the Port Authority going to kind of steer that whole process so they really are the primary people or organization that the developer would be working through?
You guys have the authority to be, whether you want to defer that to the city council or not, I guess is the question. And that would answer.
I think Bill has a question as well.
And then tying into that, and Rolf, you may weigh in, but when it comes time to having a development agreement, would that development agreement be with the city or with the port? Trying to think even.
Your choice. I mean, by design, there's 4 council members sitting on the Port Authority to have a majority representation of the city council on your port authority. And the city council, I believe, can change that if they want to a different majority if they so choose. But I think moving forward, I think you should be the main entity that would review everything. And depending upon what type of development, what type of financial package they need, you may then wish to engage the council or engage a different process. But I think you should be the clearinghouse, at least initially. And we can always discuss, process later, what makes the most sense. But I think for now, it should stay at this level because you're the owners of the property. And a development agreement could be entered into with the Port Authority. So you could steer the project fully if you wish.
Other questions about the RFP? I see what you're saying about that language, but I do think it's okay, because I think it shows that if there's Bill Sonmore, or, I know you're a part of the port too, but it's just that kind of general term about city staff being involved, I think is.
And maybe we just have a line somewhere that says, the city and the Port Authority are deemed as one of the same in this document, or something, or something along those lines, so that, it's as clear as mud then.
But they really are.
And it reserves flexibility as we define the process down the road if we make that blanket statement.
And are we saying in that where you pointed out the Port Authority and the city will partner?
Maybe we already are.
Maybe we already are covered.
Yeah.
Because again, we're going to have a sale of this too, an arm's length transaction between the city and the port on that sale of the property at some point. So then we're not one and the same. But
Right, there is a distinction.
We'll make it when we need to.
okay,
So then maybe changing some of the language of, in response to the RFP, the developer should submit a letter of interest to the Fergus Falls Port Authority.
Yeah,
And then continuing with the port.
yeah. And then basically leave it that city staff and Port Authority members will make the decisions. Fine.
Oh, yes. Couldn't find that spot. Yes. To the Port Authority.
Yep.
That's the first stop
Yeah.
for any applications.
So, yeah,
Okay.
when they send the first one in, it's going to come to the Port Authority.
Yes.
Then we can disperse it where we so fit. Yeah.
When it comes to the sale of property, the port can actually do it differently than the city council can. So port can act during the same meeting that a public hearing is held, whereas the council cannot. So it's actually a faster process to sell it through the port authority. And that's something to just consider if we're looking at speeding things along.
What is the current zoning on it right now?
It is currently zoned R4.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments about the content of the RFP? Otherwise, we can move into timeline and just filling in the gold areas here. Make sure we keep it moving along.
Yep.
Kim, do you have any recommendations? So if we approve this to go public tonight, do you have a recommendation of whether we do 30 days, 60 days?
I did talk to a developer. He thought 30 was fine. They're either going to do it or they're not going to do it, kind of thing. So, and I also checked with the guy in the office, and he just responded to one, and he said 30 is pretty common. So I think that's enough time. We're not really asking for a lot of information at this first juncture.
Kim,
So-
does it make sense? Oh, sorry, Ruth.
No, go ahead.
Does it make sense for us to do, to maybe have it start like at the beginning of a month, to say it's opening on February 1st, you have until the end of February to respond, and then we can do maybe like a week or two, but until the end of this month to do some preliminary outreach saying, hey, this is gonna be going out, get ready to apply for it when it opens? Does it make sense to just get it out there?
Yeah, February 1st is a Wednesday, and then if we said, get it by March 3rd, because February's short, that gives them to the end of the week. I think we just need to make sure, like, there's some stuff you originally had a Dropbox link and all that stuff. We obviously want to make sure all that stuff is working before we send it out. So I don't want to say that we're sending it out, like, you know, in the next day.
Okay, so February 1st to March 3rd is an option. And then if there's issues with there to contact Clara.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. And then is there anything else we need to do with the rest of the highlighted items at the bottom? Oh, these are dates?
Yeah, I'm wondering if, do we want to just, since at this point in time, it would be the entire Port Authority who would be reviewing anything that would come in. We don't have a subcommittee set or anything like that. So I'm wondering, do we just keep our regular meeting dates and say we'll be doing, you know, so we'd review beforehand, everyone would review individually, we'd come together at our meeting, have a discussion, following the meeting, then that information would go out. What do you think about that? Or do we want to have a smaller group so that discussions are not public?
That's the question I was gonna ask, is do you intend to make them public right away, or are you gonna make it public once you've had time to negotiate with somebody and understand there may be a viable project? It's up to you guys, but.
I wouldn't want to put it out there before we actually get something.
I think it would be nice to vet them prior to airing it in public.
And I assume developers would appreciate
that.
that too, Kim, is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My biggest thing is I just want to make sure, like you said, we vet them, we want to make sure that we're not dealing with another Tower Road project, and that we basically are looking at a developer who has credibility and a history. And I don't want to sit there and deal with another one that has no experience whatsoever.
So this is a suggestion, if we just put more of a general sentence at the end that says, the Port Authority will respond, or the Port Authority will communicate with all applicants within 20 days of receipt of the
Or closing date.
letter of interest.
That sounds
20 days of closing date as opposed to the closing date of the.
Well, we'd get it, like, if we got it March 1st, we would ensure that we respond, you know, but you don't even probably want to wait that long.
And I'm assuming, since we own the property, if by some chance we get multiple offers and the person who has the highest bid, you know, maybe not by a large amount, like I said, with the vetting process, does not have a very good track record, that since we do own it, I don't think we're required to take the highest bid. I'm assuming we can.
Correct.
Okay.
Oh. We can review.
And they're not proposing like a sale price. This is really them showing interest and providing you a potential proposal or work that they've done that would be consistent with what they would expect to want to do on the site. So I think in my mind, what's happening is, say you get 2 or 3, you guys decide to look at them, you say, we really like what this guy's done, we'd like, you know, the drawings, a project similar, we could see that here, and then you reach out to them and say, okay, let's have a conversation, and then you start working. It's gonna take more time at the back end. You know, you're not going to immediately just negotiate a sale and a development agreement, but the goal is then they don't have to do so much prep up front, that you're not just pushing people off because they're just, you know, got to do all these drawings and everything.
So our review process should go fairly quickly in a
Yeah.
way, because we're not really giving a lot of scoring to kind of different aspects. We either like what they've done or we don't.
Right, it's too detailed to have a selection timeline, perhaps, because
Yeah.
this is just reviewing letters of interest.
Yeah.
And,
So we should be able to do that fairly quickly.
right.
if I might add too, I mean, the goal would be you'd have a couple people, and then you might want to interview them to have more of a conversation about their skill sets and their history and what they understand about the community, so you can kind of vet them. But you can decide that after you find out who even submitted.
So maybe instead of selection timeline, it can just be submission instructions, and then following submission, the Port Authority will review all submissions and reach out individually to developers.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice to give them a timeline in the fact that, you know, the Port Authority anticipates by the end of March that decisions will be made and you'll be contacted, you know, something so they
Yes.
kind of knew an end, but,
By March 31st.
Yeah, by March 31st, let's say.
yeah.
Okay, all right. Is there a motion to accept the Riverfront RFP
I can-
with the changes that we've discussed for opening it up to the public February 1st to March 3rd?
Did you make a motion?
I can make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you, Rebecca. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thanks, Clara. Thanks, Kim. I need to.
Thank you very much. Okay,
Do
thank
we-
you, Kim.
Do we want to set a smaller selection committee under a forum that can get together and discuss and maybe do some interviews if necessary?
I would say let's wait till the next meeting to talk about that, or,
That's fine.
yeah,
Yeah,
just in
that's-
terms of
Yeah.
timeline. Thanks, Kim.
All right, thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. Okay, next on the agenda is the Norgren report via the Northeast Residential Park Preliminary Engineering Report.
So back in September or October, I can't even quite remember when we first did this. Why does this keep turning? Port Authority ordered a report on the Norgren property to start looking at what it would take to extend utilities. We've been sitting on this property for, you know, a while now, and it was platted probably, I don't even know, Mark, like 15 years ago, maybe?
At least.
Yep, so we've had it platted, we've had some ideas of where a road could be, where utilities would be extended, so Interstate Engineering stepped up, did the work for us to lay out what a plan would actually look like and put some preliminary costs to those plans and presented us with the report that you have in your packet, which boiled down to 3 different options that were given for the ways that development could either occur or not occur. So the first option is obviously do nothing. We are not required to act on the report. We can just keep things status quo, not make any action on that property. Option 2 was estimated at $3,411 to build out infrastructure for, I believe it's 33 sites. And option 3 was $3,533. So obviously costs are a little bit high, which maybe is not surprising based on the way that the world is currently. But it's at least a starting spot. We know what we're looking at, and we know, you know, what decisions we can maybe make in the future. So I'm not asking you to take any action tonight. We're just kind of starting a conversation, maybe starting to think about ways that we can move forward with the Norgren site in different ways. So the report itself gives those 3 options. The way that I see it is we maybe have a couple more options that we could look at. For instance, we have another almost 40 acres that's available out there that is unplatted at this time. So we could kind of go all in and say, okay, we see what we've done here with this original plan with 33 sites. Let's expand that. Let's see how many other housing sites we can get out there and what it would cost to extend utilities to all of them. Reason being, maybe extensions happening right off the bat, we could save some cost. Later on, having to connect in and extend further could be more cost. So it could be more cost effective to go even bigger right off the bat. So we could, in that case, go ahead and start platting the rest of that property, which would be a couple months process to do. It goes through planning commission. We would need to work with an engineering firm and a surveying firm to get that completed. Another option is to explore federal funding options because there are some things out there. Fergus Falls is what is known as a coal community because we had the Hoot Lake plant that closed. So we do have some federal funding options that are open to us that are not open to other communities. So this might be a project that's a good fit for some of those funding opportunities. We need to take a look and see. But all of these are things that we can kind of move on in the background a little bit and have unfold as we go. So again, no action is taken tonight necessarily, but I do have Alex Swartzoff from Interstate who's here who can answer any questions you might have about the report itself. But that's kind of everything. That's where we are right now. So thoughts, comments, questions?
I would say, well, I guess my questions are, do we know what the demand is? Do we have developers that are waiting for lots to build on? You know, and then if we do feel like there's sufficient demand to justify the expenditure, where would that money come from?
We have no developers who have signed anything saying, hey, if you get this built, we'll get
sure.
out there. But we have the housing study that was completed that says that housing is a need, and we have developers who are ready and willing to respond to that. So I don't want to say that it's a if we build it, they will come situation, but based on the market, I think we could be reasonably assured that we could get at least some of them built out in the next few years, and then I think you'd see growth continuing on.
Though I would caution, if there's $100,000 in assessments on those lots, I don't think that would be the reality.
No.
So it'd have to be a way to reduce, there's demand, but not at an unaffordable or unfeasible level, right?
That's a good point, yes. At where the assessments would be now, demand would be very hard. That would be really hard for people to move on. If we found a way to make it more affordable, whether that means, you know, going further with the plans and seeing if we can reduce assessments by a larger development or finding federal funding to help with that, I think then we would then it would be easier for us to say, let's move on this, you know, right now and see how it goes. But
I mean, and when you're looking at also the price tag that it's on that, what is the average size of those lots?
They vary. There are a couple like multifamily lots that are out there that are larger. But Mark, you're probably most familiar with them.
I mean, because they say right now just to build a house is $200,000 to $250,000. Now you tack on $100,000 lot onto that.
And that's assessment, that's not the lot.
Yeah.
That would be assuming the Port Authority gave them away.
How many outer areas do we have that don't have sewer and water and that people are just running with a well and their own sewer system?
It happened. It exists. I don't
mean, 'cause
know
that
off the
is-
top of my head.
I mean, if it was my choice, that would be considerably more cost effective. You know, I mean, that way, I mean, eventually the water and sewer will make it out that far, you know, over time. But, I mean, would that make it more, you know, feasible? I mean, because I just know when you get a lot of real small lots, it's hard to put in your own well and your own sewer system. You know, you get a larger lot, third acre lots or whatever, you know, it's a lot more feasible.
I think you'd have to look at the county. I'm not sure the county has some new rules on sewer systems more than water.
Yeah,
And wells,
City
actually,
code.
and wells, actually, when I think about it.
Yeah, and I think you're gonna run into issues when these wells and sewer
Yeah.
systems start failing in 20 years and then being asked to bring water and sewer out. What is the cost gonna be at that point in time? And our code does prefer people to hook into the water and sewer just because that's just the nature of the city, is have control of that. But you could do it.
So oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, you can,
Well, I was just gonna say, my understanding is that, given the price tag and the fact that there's 33 lots, that would be over $100,000, you know, for special assessments per lot, that the cost is prohibitive, probably how it stands, but I would say that I agree with you in, you know, we're not the only city that would be facing this issue of those high costs for utilities. You know, so looking into what we're doing at the legislative level or what's available at the federal level would be a great option. The density of the lots, I think, is a good question as well. How big are those lots? Is, you know, can we add?
They are larger than typical city lots. Some of them are half acre, even, you know, you got some acre lots out there. They were platted as larger lots.
Okay.
I don't have the exact numbers on me,
And some were set up more for duplexes.
Okay.
Another comment too, but go Tom
Go ahead,
first.
Tom.
well, I just, it'd be curious, it'd be good to know the opinion of the various developers in the area. You know, Natalia, I'm sure you talk to people who talk to people. Perhaps could the city work with Greater Fergus Falls to do some kind of an informal survey and say, you know, we're thinking about doing this, and maybe try to gauge the level of interest? You know, that would be good information for us to have, you know, when we do decide what we want to do here.
And tagging right on to what Tom was saying, I mean, some of our existing developments that were starting to take off, when interest rates have gone up, we've seen the construction going down, so it's not happening right now. On some areas already, so that's where I'd be cautious.
Sure.
But it goes right with what you're saying of what's the appetite and what's the,
Yeah, obviously nobody has a crystal ball, but, you know, I mean, successful developers have a lot of pretty valuable insight, and so yeah, that would be good to know if we could get a little more information on that.
Okay, any other questions or comments? No action to be taken at this point?
No.
Thank you very much for the work.
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
Good to have the information. All
There's
right,
one more layer of planning done.
one more layer. Yes, absolutely. Yes,
Look on the positive.
yes.
We now have a plan for sewer and water.
and we have an estimate.
Yep.
We have an estimate, yes. All right, anything else for the night?
Nope.
And if not, this meeting in the Port Authority is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, Madam President.
I'm sorry.
Great job, Madam President.
Oh my.